Start ఇక్కడ
No, అట్లా స్టార్ట్ చేయండి నేను స్క్రీన్ పీపీటీ
స్టార్ట్ చేసేయచ్చు.
స్టార్ట్ చేయండి
అవును.
మాట్లాడుతున్నాను.
Well, good morning, students. I hope you are all following the rules of COVID in your real life. And be careful, take care, and take care of yourself and your parents. Today's topic is, as I have already sent you the PDF, it is on hydronephrosis. Equal ga vachira betters. So, hydronephrosis, you have heard this term, but what does it mean? What is the definition of hydronephrosis? We'll go through, and what are the causes, what is the unilateral hydronephrosis or bilateral hydronephrosis, various reasons, and treatment for that. So hydronephrosis is defined as septic dilatation of the pelvical system of the kidney. It is either due to a partial or complete obstruction to the outflow of the urine, the obstruction being either continuous or intermittent. So this is the definition of hydronephrosis. A septic dilatation of the pelvical system due to partial or complete obstruction to outflow of the urinary tract, either continuous or intermittent. All these things are important. A septic dilatation, partial obstruction, complete obstruction, continuous obstruction, or intermittent obstruction. So then only it is called hydronephrosis. Unilateral can be a unilateral hydronephrosis or bilateral hydronephrosis. If there is dilatation of the ureter also, then we call it hydroureteronephrosis. So hydronephrosis is only confined to the kidney. If it is hydroureteronephrosis, that means both the ureter and kidneys, pelvical system of the kidney, are enlarged. A bilateral hydronephrosis is due to an outflow tract obstruction wherein there is increased pressure in the bladder and that is communicated to both the kidneys. That is bilateral hydroureteronephrosis, mainly due to urethral obstruction, or there can be a bilateral ureteric calculus. If the renal calculus, this is bilateral and both stones obstruct the ureter at the same time, there could be bilateral hydroureteronephrosis. So remember this definition of hydronephrosis. And hydronephrosis is classified as anatomical or functional, and also congenital and acquired. What is this anatomical obstruction, hydronephrosis? It is due to an obstruction at the pelvic junction or whatever it is, intraluminal, extraluminal, or intramural obstruction. Whereas functional is only due to lack of propagation of the peristaltic wave. You know, for the renal pelvic system also, there is peristalsis. Peristalsis starts from the pelvical system, pelvis, and ureter. And then ureteric peristalsis pushes the urine to the bladder. So there is a peristalsis of the urinary tract. Remember that. If the peristaltic wave doesn't carry through pelvic junction due to a functional obstruction, then it causes hydronephrosis. Why there should be a functional deficit? It is due to another congenital anomaly. You have analogous to this, you have several things in the intestine also, where there is anatomical continuity, but there is functional obstruction. Congenital are acquired depending on the cause. So unilateral hydronephrosis, the obstruction, ureter comes down from the pelvic junction to the ureteric meatal opening in the bladder. So the obstruction can be anywhere. The obstruction can be within the lumen, in the wall, or from outside the wall. These are all called intraluminal obstruction if it is in the lumen of the ureter, intramural if it is in the wall of the ureter, and extramural if it is obstruction is from outside. Let us start with extramural obstruction. If there is a tumor surrounding the ureter in the retroperitoneum or abdomen, it can directly cause obstruction of the ureter. And there is one condition called idiopathic retroperitoneal fibrosis. There is retroperitoneum, a lot of fibrosis that involves the ureter and causes extramural obstruction to produce hydronephrosis. Usually, the presentation of idiopathic retroperitoneal fibrosis is due to bilateral hydroureteronephrosis. There is one condition called retrocaval ureter. If If you remember, I have shown you in the congenital anomalous X-ray, wherein the ureter is posterior to the cava, and there is compression, vascular compression, and then there is hydronephrosis. Similar to the anomalous arteries, which can compress the pituitary junction, cause obstruction. That is very common in a PUG obstruction. The anomalous renal vessel, arterial vessel, which compresses the lower polar, uretrovesical junction. Then the intramural obstruction, there can be a congenital stenosis like PUG obstruction, which is most common cause of hydronephrosis, unilateral. Then there can be an obstruction to the ureter as such, like a ureterocele. Ureterocele is due to an obstruction to ureteric meatus in the bladder due to the failure of dissolution of the membrane, which is called Chaulas membrane there. So usually it disappears, leaving the ureteric meatus intact. But if it is persistent, there is obstruction and causes hydronephrosis. Likewise, small ureteric orifice also leads to hydronephrosis. And inflammatory stricture, like tuberculosis of the ureter, causes a lot of fibrosis and causes stricture. And this is very important in uterus, very common presentation in genitourinary tuberculosis earlier, hydronephrosis due to tuberculosis of the ureter. And this fibrosis is going to increase on treatment. That's why people who are to be treated for genitourinary tuberculosis, we should be aware of this fact that anything heals by fibrosis, and this fibrosis in ureter can cause stricture. So you have to take preventive measures like ureteric stenting, something before starting treatment, something like that. Then neoplasms of the ureter. Ureter also can have malignancy, urothelial malignancy, or a bladder cancer can just be there near the ureteric orifice to cause obstruction. Once there is a bladder transitional carcinoma, it can affect the entire transitional cell epithelium in the ureter and bladder and kidney. So we'll have to look for the malignancy there also. So a malignancy of the ureteric orifice or ureteric malignancy can obstruct intramurally, obstruct the kidney. Then intraluminal obstruction, the calicles in the pelvis or ureter. Ureteric stone is the commonest cause of unilateral hydronephrosis. And stuffed papilla and papillary necrosis in diabetes, which mimics the stone to cause gross dilatation of the ureter and bladder, pelvical system. Then bilateral hydronephrosis is due to a different etiology because both the uterus and pelvic system are dilated. The cause has to be peripheral. So it can be at the level of the urethra, bladder, prostate area, or the urethra. So the commonest thing, the congenital anomalies, is a posterior valve due to remnants of membrane again in the posterior urethra, especially presenting in children. It can cause bilateral hydronephrosis. You have to see a child with posterior valves and hydronephrosis infection. You will never forget such a thing. Always child passes whitish urine. He doesn't thrive properly. Failure to thrive is there. And chalk-like urine will be there if there is infection. And simply by bringing out, relieving the obstruction on either side, there will be a lot of improvement. Then urethral atresia, bladder neck obstruction. Bladder neck obstruction is due to congenital bladder neck obstruction is there, which can cause severe hydronephrosis on either side. Meatal stenosis, external urethral meatal stenosis, it looks like a very simple problem, but it can cause, if not diagnosed properly and managed, it can cause bilateral hydronephrosis. Then the acquired causes like benign hypertrophy of the prostate and closed prostate. This causes outflow obstruction. There is a lot of procedure in the bladder. The pressure is transmitted to both the kidneys. There is bilateral hydronephrosis. Again, the same thing. Post-operative TR, something like that, also cause bladder neck scarring and such obstruction. Urethral stricture is another treatable cause easily, which can lead to hydronephrosis because of the obstruction and a lot of procedure. These are all treatable causes easily. Then, this bilateral hydronephrosis leads to renal failure, which is called surgical uremia. You may lose a patient by not treating this bilateral hydronephrosis with infection due to a trivial cause. Patient may not come to you, or you may not diagnose it, but maybe lead to end-stage renal disease. So you have to be very careful. Phimosis, simple thing like phimosis also can cause bilateral hydronephrosis, which is not diagnosed properly or treated properly. What happens ultimately? The pressure is transmitted to the entire pelvic system. You see, these are the calyces. These are the calyces, dilated, grossly dilated calyces, and the pelvis dilated pelvis. And this compresses the parenchyma. Renal parenchyma is compressed, and this undergoes pressure atrophy. So ultimately, the kidney is converted to a bag of thin-walled, lobulated, fluid-filled bag, which doesn't have any function. And such a thing invites infection, stone formation, and all problems. So that's the problem with hydronephrosis. Imagine if it happens bilaterally, what is going to be the thing? Then coming to unilateral hydronephrosis, it is commonly due to idiopathic biliary junction obstruction. It is very common, PUG obstruction you call it, very common due to, as I said, anatomical narrowing at the biliary junction due to either anomalous renal artery compressing or something like that. Or simply it may not be there, but still the portion biliary junction doesn't transmit peristalsis, and there is obstruction. Calicus obstruction also can happen in the kidney, in the upper ureter. If it is blocked, it is not moving, it is got stuck, then there will be gross hydronephrosis. And one problem with this unilateral hydronephrosis is it may be silent and asymptomatic. Patient may not have pain also. So unless you do an ultrasound for some other thing, this may not be found out. Because of the fullness of the pelvic system, there may be a dull ache in the loins. That's all. It may be the clinical feature only. And any other like complication like infection, stone formation, hematuria may attract your attention to the kidney. Then only investigate and then find out. Acute renal colic are not very common unless there is a common colic, stone, or some clot, hematuria clot, something like that. And there is one condition called intermittent hydronephrosis. Hydronephrosis is there, it disappears and again appears again. This is called Dietl's crisis. We will discuss it because it's an important short note for you. And this unilateral hydronephrosis is nowadays diagnosed by antenatal ultrasound. More and more people are being diagnosed with this unilateral hydronephrosis, and other congenital anomalies of the bladder, urethral valves are all these diagnosed by ultrasound nowadays. So one can be aware of this unilateral hydronephrosis. If it is diagnosed antenatally in the child, then you have to be very careful and follow the patient. Now coming to Dietl's crisis. What is Dietl's crisis? Dietl's crisis was first reported by Joseph Dietl in 1864. This appears as intermittent uretero-pelvic junction obstruction, often associated with an aberrant vessel to the lower pole of the kidney, and may cause a distinct clinical syndrome of episodic crampy upper abdominal pain, nausea, and vomiting, followed by relief after a brisk attack of diuresis. This is typical of a Dietl's crisis. Patient will have abdominal pain, colic, and gradually the hydronephrosis goes on increasing. This can be due to various reasons. One such reason is an aberrant vessel to the lower pole. And patient will have pain, nausea, and vomiting. And suddenly there is a lot of diuresis and the pain disappears. This is Dietl's crisis. So if you come, mostly children present with this pain, which is not diagnosed. Pain, cause of the abdominal pain is not diagnosed in such patients. In between, if you see them in between, the time of attack, if you have patient has severe symptomatology, you can suspect that and investigate. Otherwise, in between the quiescent period, they will be symptomatic, no lump will be palpable. If you do an ultrasound also, it may not be very different. So they report intermittent bouts of pain with normal physical examination in between, and imaging studies also are normal in that period. This waxing and waning nature can lead to diagnostic confusion. Unless you have something in mind, you cannot diagnose. That's why it is said, you have to have something in mind, otherwise you will not be diagnosing this thing. Doctors should be aware of this thing, especially pediatrics people. Patient presents with intermittent abdominal pain, you have to rule out diabetes crisis. So what is the reason? As I said, in a normal vessel compressing the pelvic junction, or an intrinsic malformation of segment of the proximal ureter, which doesn't transmit the peristalsis. High ureteral insection. Normally, pelvic junction is funnel shaped. It has a funnel shape wherein the pelvis drains into the ureter like a funnel. But if the ureter is not in a funnel shape but here inserted at the higher level, the drainage is not proper. So as it fills up, there will be hydronephrosis. There can be a small polyp or something like that in the ureter, which can also cause intermittent obstruction. So how do you diagnose it? You have to examine him at the time of pain and investigate him at that time. Then you'll be able to diagnose this hydronephrosis. Or this pain can be precipitated by diuresis, inducing beverages like coffee or alcohol, or even a diuretic, Lasix, something like that, which is given, produces diuresis and produces pain. Then, if you do an ultrasound, you see that pelvic system is dilated and there is hydronephrosis. This is about Diethel's crisis. So this also is a hydronephrosis. It should be treated like hydronephrosis. It cannot be managed conservatively. Hydronephrosis presenting as Diethel's crisis should be managed like a hydronephrosis by surgical maneuvers. So what are the clinical features? As I said, clinical features can be silent. There may not be any symptomatology which specific. There is no specific symptomatology for this hydronephrosis. If it is due to a lower tract obstruction and bilateral hydronephrosis, we find bladder outlet symptoms like with hesitancy, difficulty to pass urine, frequency, and in examine, you find a distended bladder. That's what is important. In this bilateral hydronephrosis, you find a distended bladder if it is a lower tract obstruction. Or it can be due to bilateral upper tract obstruction. We were discussing the other day about injuries of the ureter. Ligation of the both sides of the ureter. You are not immediately diagnosed about the damage done to the ureter. Then it presents as bilateral hydronephrosis. And bilateral urinary calculus impaction. Renal calculus is a bilateral disease. Sometimes ureteric stones can obstruct both the ureters at the same time, can lead to hydronephrosis, or if it is a total obstruction, can lead to anuria, absence of production of the urine. It is a very dangerous thing, urological emergency. You will have to treat it as a urological emergency. If it is causing only mild obstruction, it can lead to bilateral hydronephrosis. And another important thing you find in this thing is, you find that the pelvic system of the kidney is dilated in pregnancy. This is a physiological dilatation, which is common, more marked until 20th age, gel resolves due to effect of progesterone, and normal size back within 12 weeks of the delivery. So hydronephrosis of pregnancy is a physiological phenomenon, but if it persists even after 20th week, then pre-existing lesions or something like that might be thought of. Then coming to imaging, investigations. You examine clinically, find out some reason is, but you have to confirm it by an investigation. The first line of investigation for any abdominal pain is ultrasound. Nowadays, ultrasound is thought to be an extension of physical examination, not an investigation. That's why this ultrasound is done by urologist himself sometimes, not a radiologist. This is the least invasive investigation to diagnose the PUJ or any other abdominal conditions. In utero also, this is the most invasive thing, investigation, where you can find hydronephrosis in a fetus, because you have to be careful after delivery. Previously, it is a bilateral hydronephrosis due to posterior valves, as in utero. People used to advised intervention in utero so that the damaged kidneys is not there. But after identifying that it doesn't improve the prognosis because the kidneys themselves are damaged, they are not doing it nowadays. Simple thing like putting a catheter resolves all these problems. So that they used to do, now that they are not doing it. But being aware of this problem, if like obstruction, then soon after delivery, you can take remedial measures. If the postnatal ultrasound pelvic diameter is more than 3 millimeters, it is considered to indicate the presence of hydronephrosis. So usually the radiologists give a diagnosis of ultrasound, mild, moderate, severe hydronephrosis. What is this mild, moderate and severe hydronephrosis? AP diameter is taken as a criteria. A renal pelvic anterior-posterior diameter up to 4 to 6 millimeters diameter is considered to be mild hydronephrosis, 7 to 10 millimeters as moderate hydronephrosis, and more than 10 millimeters severe hydronephrosis. So this is a grading of the hydronephrosis on ultrasound. Then you know the anatomy by doing an ultrasound, how the pelvic system is it dilated or otherwise. But you'll have to confirm the function of the kidney also when you want to do surgeries or confirm it. This is done by urography or an IVP, intravenous pyelogram. It is done only if there is significant function in the obstructed kidney. How do you know? You do it, and if there is no visualization of the kidney on that side, you see that that is not functioning properly. So you cannot say it's not functioning. You can say it is not visualized on routine urography because the function or non-function is tested by some other investigation which is complicated. Sometimes in this intravenous urogram, you find that there's a big pelvis. Sometimes extrarenal pelvis is big, which is seen. And you also know whether the pelvis is intrarenal or extrarenal. Which pelvis does more kidney damage? It is an intrarenal pelvis because it has no place to distend. That goes on. The pressure is directly transmitted to the pelvic system of the kidney, which undergo pressure atrophy. In an extrarenal pelvis, for some time, that takes the burden of increased pressure. Then it increases. So I put a question: what happens to the urine in the pelvis? It is obstructed. It is not coming down. Does it remain static, or does it? What does happen to that? Of course, it is too much for you. But this urine, which is in the pelvis, undergoes recirculation through certain mechanisms present in the body, like backflow, pylolymphatic, pylovenous, lymphatic. I mean, these protective measures are there in the kidney. They undergo recirculation. That's why follow-up films up to 30 hours is important in hydronephrosis suspected thing when the kidney is not seen properly in the initial films. This is because the dye undergoes recirculation and can be seen at a later time. So that's why you have to take a delayed film in intravenous urogram. Minor calcis, clubbing of the minor calcis is the earliest sign of hydronephrosis. Then, you know, after doing a delayed film, if you are fortunate to have the dilated ureter seen also, then you can see the level of obstruction. But nowadays, this part is taken over by other methods of diagnosis. Then prone films. As I said, if the insertion of the ureter is not proper, if you take a prone film, a hydronephrotic appearing pelvis may completely empty. Likewise, a diuretic urogram. If you give diuretic like Lasix, that completely empties. That means it's only a stasis and not gross anatomical problem and hydronephrosis. So these two things are important: prone films and diuretic urogram. This is how you see radiological investigations. This is all urine. Then these are the certain films, IVP. You see this here. This is a dilated pelvic system clubbing comparison to opposite side. So this is how an intravenous pyelogram looks like. Then you have to know the anatomy, but you have to know the function, how much of function is there. Suppose it is one side on ultrasound, the kidney is very much dilated, there's only a bag of urine, you think like that, and you think it's not functioning. Non-visualization of kidney, non-IVP is not a sign of non-function. It has to be established by isotope renography. Is the best to detect dilatation, the functional obstruction caused by the obstruction. Because the parenchyma gets atrophy, compression atrophy due to hydronephrosis, and you have to see how much of this tissue is functioning. We use DTPA labeled with technetium-99 tracked by COM camera to do this test. DTPA is dimethylene triamine pentaacetate. This is the chemical used along with technetium-99 scanning, and you do the pictures over a prolonged period, 2 to 3 hours. What happens? All these things are filtered by the kidneys, concentrated and excreted. So all these functions you can see. But there is another scan wherein you can see the morphology of the kidney. DTPA scan, that is called DMSA scan, whereas this DTPA scan gives an idea as to the function, filtration, obstruction, and emptying, how much time it is taking to empty. This is a typical renogram where you can see that here it is excreted through pelvic, but this side it is, the ureter is not seen at all, it's not obstructed, it is obstructed and not filtering at all. So that gives you, and here there is delayed function. 2 minutes, this is functioning immediately, whereas there is delayed function on this side. So there is some derangement of the function. So what we do, if there is a bilateral disease, hydronephrosis, both the kidneys are affected, you want to operate, you have to operate on both sides. Then you have to select which kidney is functioning better and operate on that side. If you want to remove the kidney because of the gross fibrosis and no function should be less than 20% of the total function. Then the Whitaker's test. What is this Whitaker's test? I was telling you about the functional obstruction at the pelvic junction. So you have to show that it's only a functional obstruction, not an anatomical obstruction. For this, you do a percutaneous puncture of the kidney, and then you instill infusion, IV infusion, and the pressure is monitored both in the kidney and abdominal, intrapelvic pressure also. Intrapelvic means in the bladder also you measure the pressure. So percutaneous puncture of the kidney and fluid is increased and pressure is monitored. Abnormal rise in intrapelvic pressure shows there is a functional obstruction. So anatomically it may be right. And then this retrograde pyelography, what does it mean? By retrograde pyelography, you mean you do a cystoscopic examination wherein you put an instrument through the urethra into the bladder and see what is there. You identify ureteric orifices which are at the ends of the trigone, and then you cannulate on that side. Which side? Suppose you want hydronephrosis on right side, you have to evaluate the ureter completely. So because it's not visualized on the intravenous ureterogram, you have to do this test to see the ureter in entirety to confirm the site of obstruction. But this is done only just before the corrective surgery for fear of infection. You may introduce infection and that may convert the infected hydronephrosis. So we just do before the surgery on the table under CRM guidance. So you see, this is a retrograde pyelogram. Obstruction is the pelvic rejection only. Rest of the ureter is normal, coming down to the bladder is all there. So you see, this is narrowing, very small, narrow ureter seen, and pelvis is grossly dilated. This is due to pelvic ureteric obstruction, retrograde pyelogram in hydronephrosis, pelvic. So, is there a medical treatment for hydronephrosis? No. If there is established hydronephrosis and it is going to increase, this is the more important in antenatally diagnosed hydronephrosis. It may come down because of the changes. It is okay. We follow them. Mild, moderate, severe categorization. It is a severe, more than 10 millimeters, 11 millimeters, definitely may require surgery. And the earlier the intervention, the better is the prognosis for the kidney. So when do you operate? For bouts of renal pain because of the distension of the pelvis, increasing hydronephrosis, you follow a serial ultrasounds. Ultrasound is good enough for following up. There is increased hydronephrosis and it is going on. Then there is increase in parenchymal damage. If the kidney is going to be destroyed, you don't wait for it to be destroyed totally, you have to intervene. And there is infection. Infection is almost an emergency-like thing. If it is grossly infected, you do percutaneous nephrostomy to drain it. And caliculi formation. Caliculi again show infection and stasis. The stasis is more, there will be caliculi. One significant feature is there will be multiple caliculi. In a static urine, multiple caliculi form. Then what is the treatment? What the treatment is? Pyeloplasty. It's called pyeloplasty, not nephrectomy. Pyeloplasty means you do a plastic repair of the pelvis. You cut off the excessive pelvic tissue, renal pelvic tissue, and anastomose the ureter to form a funnel-shaped anastomosis wherein the urine flows freely into the ureter. This is done by either open operation, laparoscopy, or robotic surgery. Nowadays, nobody is doing open operations. They're trying to do laparoscopy and robotic surgery. But whatever you do the same thing. You trim the excess of pelvis and then cut the ureter and make an anastomosis, spatulated ureter, and anastomosis to the renal pelvis so that it forms a funnel-shaped anastomosis. This operation is called Anderson-Heinz operation. This is an example of dismembered pyeloplasty. Dismembered means you cut the atletic segment and the ureter, which is there. So you dismember the ureter and the renal pelvis, and then anastomosis later on. There are other non-dismembered techniques which are not for you for undergraduates. Then one thing is endoscopically, be done endoscopically. Endoscopically, you can do endopylotomy, wherein you pass an instrument, like ureteroscope, flexible ureteroscope, then up to the pelvis. Then you can dilate it or make a cut, endopylotomy. So you disrupt the tissues at the pelvic junction. Stricture, it will look like more like a stricture dilatation. But you have to follow this, and if it fails, you have to intervene surgically. So this is for obstructions. Initially, you have to do an operation. If this recurs, you can try this endoscopic pylolysis or endoscopic pylotomy or balloon dilatation. This is not the primary treatment of the hydronephrosis, but you can give it if somebody doesn't want surgery. You can give it a trial and follow it up. After this dilatation, you keep a stent for it to be stabilized, then you remove the stent. So this is another method of surgery. So, but the treatment, whatever it is, your motto is to preserve kidney tissue. Because once God has given you two kidneys, but this hydronephrosis is potentially a bilateral disease. If you remove one kidney for hydronephrosis, there is only one more kidney. You cannot remove that also. So, especially in children, you have to preserve the kidney. As I said before, the motto of urologists is to conserve nephrons. So this renal tissue has to be preserved. And whenever possible, you have to do a repair, a pyeloplasty only. No role for nephrectomy, unless it is grossly dilated, just a bag of urine with less than 20% function and infected. That's the only time when you plan for a nephrectomy. And even in exploration, previously, we used to depend on exploration and deciding whether to remove the kidney or not based on the parenchymal thickness and reaction of the urine. Urine should be acidic. If it is acidic, as I said, the functions of the kidney are one, acidification of the kidney is also there. Then a biopsy, wherein you take a small tissue of the glomerulus and find how many glomeruli are there. There is complete ionization of the tubules and non-functioning. Urine is not acidic, and the specific gravity is 10 are fixed. And thin parenchyma with no tissue, then we used to decide on nephrectomy. But now, you can depend on the investigations to have a preoperative diagnosis and decision to make a nephrectomy. But it should not be done unnecessarily. And I was talking about the bilaterality of the hydronephrosis. Suppose it's bilateral, on which side to operate first? You have two children. One is thin, the other is fat. Whom do you feed? You feed the thinner child. But here, when there is functioning, both kidneys are there, you do a better functioning kidney because you can, whenever there is a function, operation on one kidney, there is suppression of function on that side. So, if you operate on a better functioning kidney, it further takes over the function of the opposite kidney also. It should be the kidney recovers faster, better functioning kidney. And as I said, you should create a funnel-shaped pelvic junction. That's the aim of your surgery. So, if you do that, then you will be draining better and there will be any problem. But the chances are one recurrence of the pituitary junction obstruction could be there, and you will have to operate again to come out of that. So now about this Anderson-Heinz dismembered pyloprosty, which we have been discussing. This is the pictorial part. You see here, the pelvis is grossly dilated and there is narrowing of the pituitary junction. So this is normal ureter, this is the narrowed ureter. So what you have to do, you have dismembered both. You have cut the narrow segment of the ureter and then access of the renal pelvis here. So you see the incision which is made there. That's how you cut leg base and exercise. Then you'll have to spatulate the ureter. Spatulate means cut on one side so that it provides tissue for repair. This is spatulated ureter. Then you have to suture it so that you will not suture it switching the sides. You have to switch it. Peristalsis wave forms in isoperistalsis. So this suture to the posterior wall and then the anterior wall, and you put a stent. This comes there, this comes here. So this is the suture, entirely sutured uretero-pelvic junction. This will be stented, and some people choose to do a nephrostomy by keeping in a tube there. Some people do not keep the nephrostomy there. So this is how. We must be sure that this is functioning. So we'll have to investigate later on by doing an intravenous pyelogram, by giving a diuretic or not giving, examine following whether it is draining properly or not. If it is not draining properly, means we'll have to do that endoscopic pylotomy or something like that again to see that it functions properly. Usually surgical relief by Anderson-Heinz technique is very good, gives complete relief. So this is, you know, this operation, mostly hydronephrosis is tackled. Sometimes, as I said, dismembered, non-dismembered, you don't cut this. Just make a flap of all this thing, cut it, and then try to suture it. That is our non-dismembered pyeloplasty. This is an example of dismembered pyeloplasty. So coming to that, when recapitulating, hydronephrosis is an aseptic dilatation of the pelvical system, either due to partial or complete obstruction of the ureter to pelvic junction, either due to a continuous or intermittent obstruction. This is hydronephrosis, aseptic dilatation. So the complication is sepsis, stone formation, and there could be hemorrhage. And bilateral disease leads to uremia. If there is decreased function because of the bilateral hydronephrosis, there can be renal failure. This is called a reversible renal failure because if you intervene properly, it can create. Whereas a parenchymal lesion, kidney, doesn't improve whatever you do. Whereas if you give surgical relief to a surgical problem, may come down, serum creatinine may come down to a certain level, but you cannot totally may not be able to bring down normal when the disease is advanced. But if you intervene early, that can come down and this can be treated. So this is a treatable cause of renal failure. Medical renal failure and surgical renal failure. Medical renal failure is really irreversible. You can only maintain at that level by taking precautions. Whereas surgical thing, simple stenting or putting an nephrostomy can improve kidney function drastically. That's what I was telling you. Post-ureteral valves, we used to do a cutaneous ureterostomy. The ureter turns like a small intestine. At operation, very difficult to notice which is ureter and which is small intestine. But since you are only extraperitoneal, most likely it is only ureter. But you have to identify it by peristalsis, aspirating urine from it. Then only you are sure it is ureter and not intestine. Then bring out a loop of the ureter outside, make an opening and suture it to skin. That is called ureterostomy. So with this, the sepsis comes down, urine drains well, the parenchymal pressure comes down, and parenchyma picks up some function, and these children recover. Of course, ultimately, the cause of bilateral hydronephrosis in a post-ureteral valve is because the kidneys are deficient in development. Other functions, other urinary tract anomalies also will be there. This is deficient. That's why this results. And almost all these people may require a kidney transplantation at a later time. So what is the treatment of bilateral hydroretinal nephrosis? Again, surgical management, operating on a better functioning kidney so that it takes over, it recovers faster. If you operate on, there is another argument. You operate on a lesser functioning kidney before. The better functioning kidney will give a better chance of survival. Gives the other kidney a better chance of survival. But naturally, you operate on symptomatic side first. Suppose it's causing severe pain, you operate on that side first, and then bigger kidney first. That's the indication for surgery in the bilateral case. The unilateral hydronephrosis, you have to think of the possible causes, all causes, intraluminal, intramural, and extramural causes of obstruction, which cause obstruction, and treat them. Usually, it is an idiopathic pituitary junction obstruction, which appears as a TC. The another commonly found thing in hydronephrosis is an aberrant renal vessel, which is obstructing the pituitary junction, as a result of which there is renal obstruction and atresia at that segment of the uterus. So again, you have to do a dismembered pyeloplasty and bring the pituitary junction anterior to the vessel. Is it not? Otherwise, once again, that goes on compressive. You cannot cut the vessel because it supplies a portion of the kidney which undergoes necrosis if you cut the vessel. So all these things, as I said, there is a functional obstruction also. You have to exercise that. That atresia segment you have to exercise and make an anastomosis. Bilateral hydronephrosis, be very careful, be attentive about the possible causes and treat the cause. You have seen BPH, benign hypertrophy of the prostate also, the patient neglects, there is retention of urine, pressure is transmitted to kidneys, bilateral hydronephrosis, there is infection and uremia. Uremia is very dangerous. That if infection occurs due to gram-negative organisms in the urinary tract, that leads to gram-negative septicemia, which is very dangerous. The genital tract of the female, genitourinary tract of the female and genitourinary tract of the male. Gram-negative septicemia is very dangerous and life-threatening. So we have to manage this without situation coming to that. Diagnose obstruction early and manage properly. I think that's about the hydronephrosis. Now it's open for questions. You have to ask questions so that I can answer those things. Right? Can put questions. As I said, if you don't ask questions, you are not understood anything or you are not attentive. Right? I see the attendance is only 123 today. I don't know what has happened to others. So this attendance is being marked and this will be sent to the university for permit you for examination. I don't know why you are so busy these days in the morning attending the classes, or you are selective about attending classes. I don't know. But this is not a proper way of behavior. You have to attend classes. People are taking a lot of trouble to prepare for this and present to you the class. If you don't attend, it's a waste. Anything? Yes, I see one person putting a question. Most severe complication of hydronephrosis. Any complication is severe if you don't react properly. I was telling you, if it gets infected, then the entire kidney melts like anything. If obstruction, infection in the presence of obstruction leads to destruction of the kidney. Entire kidney becomes a bag of pus. There may have many function, and then it will end in nephrectomy, loss of kidney. So infection is a dreaded complication of the testing. I've seen again, the attendance is coming down. 3 people have already gone. I warned you last time, that is bad manners. I don't know what you do. Your other students should not have any other activity except attending classes and reading. Why hydronephrosis only? Aseptic dilatation in calluses. How is septic dilatation called? Septic dilatation is called pyonephrosis, isn't it? Hydronephrosis is uninfected, I think. Pyonephrosis, if there is infection like tuberculosis or some other infection in the kidney, then the kidney becomes a pyonephrotic kidney. That is called pyonephrosis. This is called hydronephrosis. The definition itself is aseptic dilatation. If it is infected, it is no longer called plain hydronephrosis. It's called infected hydronephrosis or pyonephrosis. So it's a bag of pus, it is called pyonephrosis. No more questions? If you don't ask, I'll put your questions and you'll have to answer. That is a collateral damage that can occur if you don't ask questions. I'd like to tell you, in urinary tract, for operations, you always use a suture which is absorbable. It should be absorbed by the body. Otherwise, urinary tract contains so many things that so stones can form over the suture material. That's why Vicryl, chromic catgut, or whatever. We used to use chromic catgut previously, but now we are not doing it. So it should always be an absorbable suture material. And nowadays, with the double J stent available to drain the urine, we are not doing nephrostomy. Or previously, you make an anastomosis. How do you know it is functioning or not? You used to keep a tube in the pelvical system, bring it out, which is called a nephrostomy. Now it is done. A percutaneous nephrostomy is being done under radiological guidance. When you do an open operation, there is no need for radiological. We used to put it out. Then we used to clamp and see how the urine is coming down. If patient complains of pain, fever, that means the anastomosis is not working. Now you can put a dye into that and take a picture, see whether it is draining properly or not. Post-operative pyelogram. You can do post-operative pyelography. Can there be a kidney scarring due to hydronephrosis? Yes, if there is infection, recurrent attacks of infection. And in hydronephrosis, there is simply dissolves. Scarring is for a low-grade infection like reflux, urinary reflux, or small infection. Not hydronephrosis is already a bag of urine. If a little amount of infection occurs, then it will turn to infected hydronephrosis. The scarring occurs in reflux nephropathy and chronic infection, not in a hydronephrosis, but in a normal kidney. In a normal kidney, mild infections and reflux, vesico-ureteric reflux with infection can cause renal scarring. Whereas hydronephrosis is already a bag of pus, is not scarred, it is destroyed. Okay, if nothing else, good. Thank you. Thank you very much.